My name is Joyce, and I will be this afternoon's host. I'm a program and marketing specialist at Homemade Plus. So we might have talked if your kids are in our reading and writing courses, or you might have read something that I wrote. Otherwise, nice to meet you. And by the way, I see many familiar names on our list of registrants. So if you are a longtime viewer of these webinars, I just want to say thank you from all of us at Homemade Plus. It really does a lot that you continue to be interested in our work. In tonight's webinar, as the title shows, is about the necessity of reflective writing in personal statements. I'm really excited to have Dr. Glen as our speaker tonight, since he has a very rich background in this subject.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Joyce, for sharing that. Yeah, my name's Glenn. I got my bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Notre Dame. After that, I started teaching through Teach for America in Hawaii, where I also got my master's in education. That experience in Hawaii is where I started my college counseling. I started getting kids into college, often kids who, weren't used to understanding the college process, really fell in love with that, took that on as a full-time job as a college counselor at an IB school out in Palestine. Got really interested in education, started a nonprofit out there that runs summer camps that helps kids get into college. Started to, while I was doing that, I was also getting my PhD from education, graduating in May, so I'm officially a doctor. And as a result of that work in Palestine and through my work here at Harmony Plus, helped get a lot of kids into college, help them get into their dream schools. It's really a passion of mine, being able to let kids, find out their passions and find out what colleges can help them to achieve those passions.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the introduction. So in today's talk, I guess we will first explain the current college application landscape, which is the hot topic among parents. And then we're also excited to hear you discussing the reflective writing by showing us some real cases. And of course, at the end of the talk, we'll also share some tips about how to develop reading reflective writing skills. So and now let's get started.
College application process is a weird and confusing game. It's constantly shifting. And so it is completely understandable if you're like, I don't get it. I don't get these small parts. We'll accept all from the most nuanced questions to what you might think, is this too basic? We love them all because it is complicated. It is complicated, as I mentioned, because it is constantly shifting. This last year has seen that shift dramatically increase with that UC system becoming test blind. This was originally, like, if you have not been paying close attention to it, you're like, oh, I thought it was test optional because of COVID. Like that was true. That was as of November. So just like 5 months ago, they had a Supreme Court case where they were like, nope, it's actually going to be completely test blind. What that means is that even if you take the SAT, score 1600, you're like killing it, and you submit that, they won't look at it. They will not look at your scores. This is for 2022. It is up until 2025 is what they are saying that is going to be the case, where they will then institute their own. They're like, oh, we're going to develop our own test. But that is what they said 6 months ago. They're actually getting a lot of pushback on that because, frankly, their test is probably not going to be as good as what they're replacing. So my bet would be that standardized test doesn't even come through. Like it is going to be a complete shift away from these standardized tests. And the UC system is really leading the charge in this. Not only is it like the most prestigious public university system, it also gets the most applicants. And so they are sort of leading this push, but the other schools are not far behind. Like the Ivy Leagues, so all the prestigious ones, have paused it for 2022. So if you're applying, they'll be like, nope, also not a requirement. They're not saying like we will not look at it, but it is completely optional. You do not have to submit it. And this is actually the case of 55% of the universities. The four-year universities are not requiring this. My prediction based on looking at these trends is that rate is only going to increase. The ones that go completely blind, where they're like, we will refuse to look at this, I think is going to increase because of the success that they're seeing in this year's application pool. My prediction is that standardized test is going to become even less and less important because as California goes, so too does like the rest of the United States. So this obviously begs the question, like, wait, so they're not looking at my SAT scores, they're not looking at my perfect 1600. Well, what are they looking at? So the selective ones, that's when I want to like do that deep dive in. Let's make sure, what they're looking at. And they are stating that we are looking more at grades, extracurricular activities, and personal statements. So that obviously means there is this increased pressure on taking rigorous courses, taking these AP courses. Those weigh even more than before. So if you're a parent, you're like, I got to make sure my kids are taking AP classes and doing well in those AP courses because those are going to have increased weight. Those GPAs still matter. Just because there's no SAT, your kid does not mean like, oh, I don't have to learn to read and write. No, it's still important. They're just not measuring it within that standardized test for that SAT. What they are looking at even more though, and this is literally from the words of the provost, so one of the top people at UCLA, like we're looking for evidence of resilience, persistence, drive, passion, and creativity. So they're looking for much more intangibles. What we might think is intangibles, these actually are tangible in certain ways that we will talk about. But the big takeaway is that like parents, like the SAT is on its deathbed. Like the amount of stress that you need to think about, like, oh, I don't know how they're going to do. My kids only got an 1100. I should put them in SAT classes right away. Like, no, you don't need to do that. You need to focus on other things that they're focusing on. You do not have to worry about the SAT. Definitely for the UC system, increasingly across the board. The SATs are just becoming way less important. Academics still matter, but the SAT is way less important.
Okay, so it seems that while more and more schools are now pausing SAT requirements, the other like qualitative materials will certainly only become more and more important, right? But first of all, like, is there any specific reason why schools are just de-emphasizing standardized tests?
Yeah, and actually that's a great question because that why is what we should actually be focusing on. If we look at that why, we will be actually able to understand what they are looking for more and be able to orient ourselves in our education processes to better attain admission to these universities. Because there is this larger trend towards holistic application review. These shifts were definitely like accelerated by COVID. Like they were that catalyst that made them cut it quickly. But these sort of forces that were working against standardized tests have been a long time coming. They represent this larger shift that we need to de-emphasize standardized tests. The reasons for this, like the first thing is that they don't really measure what standardized tests don't measure the skills and traits that students need to be successful. They don't measure those skills and traits that are going to be successful in the larger world. Like the only thing that they really measure is how to take a test, which I know, like how many people have taken a test outside of education, right? Like once you get in the workforce, you don't take tests, you're doing projects, you're doing like more hands-on work, you're doing assignments, but not like where there's a standardized test in A, B, C, D. So they're like, these are not the qualities. The qualities that they are looking for is that, and this comes straight from the universities themselves, they're looking for those students who are passionate, reflective, curious, talented, hardworking, and engaging, right? So like hardworking, yeah, that's what a standardized test shows, but it can't show how a person is curious. It can't show how a person is talented. It can't show how a person is reflective upon themselves. That is the most optimistic view. I think the more like practical or almost cynical view is that these universities want students who will ultimately grow their brands. They are interested in being able to like increase their brand recognitions. Universities, like any other corporations, are a brand that require recognition. And a little bit more on that, what I mean by that, these brands that I'm talking about are built ultimately on the impact that they have on the world. That's the image that these universities want to have. But it's also not just universities. Like high schools are even more and more this way. They want to be seen as like, oh, our students, they come to Nueva, they come to college prep, and they go on and they make a huge impact on the world. Because that when they see those kids like in the news and like, oh, where did that kid go to school? Oh, they went to Nueva. Oh, they went to college prep, right? Like that makes those schools look better. And that's ultimately what the game is. So the students are like, the schools are ultimately like investing in students. That's how they accept them. Oh, like we want to make this kid look like ours because we want that brand, more prestige, more applicants, more money for research, all that stuff. So how they measure what that is these sort of like three categories. They want leaders who will address issues, right? Like they want to have the person who is addressing something on climate change. They want that expert on the news to be coming, oh, this is a Stanford person. This is a UC Berkeley person. But it doesn't have to be climate change, right? It can be any issue. Like that, as long as the student is showing that they are passionate about it, that's what they want. It could be climate change, it could be homelessness, it could be batteries for electric cars, it could be like more swings in the park. Like it doesn't matter, but they just want to see that proof. Oh, that kid is interested in issues. That kid is interested in making a difference in a world. When he comes to Notre Dame, he's going to learn a lot and that issue might change, but we see that spark, we see that engagement, we see that curiosity already, and that's what we want to invest in. They also want experts in niche areas. So what do I mean by niche areas? Like these specializations. You know, this is why the kid who is like, oh, they're the number one like best ocean kayaker there is, right? Like, oh, that's interesting. That looks special. But like, it doesn't have to be just athletics, right? You could have a deep interest in like dark grim anime. Like that could be your like game. You could be one of the like top leaders in like in video games, but you are like actually working within your clan to push up against like toxicity in games. Like that is what you do. You organize around that. You are a moderator on Reddit and Wikipedia, and like you have this expertise about everything that it comes to these categories. Like they want to see that specialization because they know that if you can rise to top in any one field, you can probably do it in another field, and that's something they want to invest in. Ultimately, this all comes down to like, how do you get this? How do you become this expert? How do you become this leader? They're recognizing it as having these three skills, these ability to like analyze problems, understand the different parts of it, reflect upon their own role in like how they can apply to those different problems, different components of that problem, and then ultimately develop themselves to be able to address those different components. So it's that constant cycle of analyzing, reflecting on themselves, and oh, because of this, here's what I need to do. And they did that. Now let's analyze it some more. So it's that constant. It's almost like, you know, for your science people out there, that those scientific methods. That's what you need to do. This is what, and you look at any mission statement, you look at any admissions profile. This is all they're saying. Like they're putting this out there. The question becomes like, okay, if this is what you want, how do I get my kid to do this? How do I demonstrate that my kid has done this? And ultimately, that will come down through the personal statement, which is a form of reflective writing, which is that other half of what this webinar is about.
Yeah, definitely. And like it is actually a very good trend that more and more schools are now realizing that standardized tests really do not tell much about the candidates, especially when it comes to the personalities such as leadership, resilience, things like that. And but I also think that some of our guests tonight are still confused about reflective writing. So what is exactly reflective writing? And could you explain this more and show us some examples?
Yeah, happy to. This is definitely the most important thing. I'm going to address the question real quick in here because I do want to make sure that you get these answers. You're coming for reasons. We're not seeing trends yet to this question that are dropping out of because they can't focus on academics. It's a good question. We're not seeing these trends for two reasons. One, the data is too short, like they don't know what is going on yet. They just started these major shifts. And then two, they're ultimately like it depends a lot on the different majors and the different universities. So like at a major that is still going to overemphasize, oh, it might be better to emphasize. So there's this question, let me, so everyone is on this, do you see trends that kids can't graduate from the UC and drop schools since the schools are not focusing on academics for admissions? It will vary on universities and vary on majors. Like the schools that don't actually emphasize a lot of standardized tests in the way that they administer, they're like not going to be seeing these. Schools that do, those like more of the engineerings and the STEMs, are like actually going through this process right now of like, wait a minute, how we're teaching is not actually accurate to getting those skills that we want. We're getting a kid that can ace a test, but does that necessarily demonstrate what they need to do to be a doctor or be an engineer? No. And so you're actually seeing one of the programs I worked with at the University of Wisconsin-Madison was the Delta program that is like literally trying to shift this because they're like, we're not doing well enough by our engineers. So it's a good question. We're not seeing that data yet, but still something to keep in mind. But what we are seeing is this trend towards the reflective writing and the importance of reflective writing for the personal statement, which of course then begs the question that Joyce was asking. So what exactly is reflective writing? Reflective writing can be defined as like describing how any experience that you have, like describing your experiences and how they shape you, your view on the world, and your goals in life. And that's ultimately the goal of this sort of reflective writing, is this analysis of self. So just like analytical writing, it requires you to break down the different parts of any experience and also of yourself and really see how they work together. It is answering that question of like knowing thyself, going back, all the way to Socrates. How well do you know yourself, and how well can you write about that? So ultimately, what it does is it combines three other types of writing. It combines descriptive, narrative, and memoir styles of writing. Descriptive writing is that vivid language, that showing but not telling. And you will get this in English classes. You will also sometimes get the narrative writing, which is this like being able to write that follows a plot. You will rarely see, but occasionally see this memoir where you are piecing together past experiences and stories for this like larger message. That one is less taught, but it's sometimes taught. But reflective writing combines all three of those together to really make those styles about like how well do I understand myself, the world, my experiences in them, towards some larger goal of who I am. And this is really unfortunate because often schools don't teach this. There's not the same style of writing. I never got this style of writing until my personal statements. And I was like, what do I do? And so there's this huge gap in being able to suddenly meet these requirements. And it requires requires training because it's another style of writing, to how this actually plays out in personal statements. Let me go through some of these personal statements. So these what you're seeing here are the personal interest questions. So these are what the essays are on the UCs. And as we go through them, I think it's helpful to analyze them through this understanding of what is reflective writing. Because once you do that, you'll be like, oh, this is what they are looking for. These are the skills that I need to be able to develop. And thus you'll be like, oh, wow, I really need to make sure that I am actually practicing this, because the UC system is saying like these essays are even more important now that there's no standardized test. These essays, these personal interest questions, which you have to choose 4 of these, become so much more important. So like this first question here, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. Already you're seeing within that, like, you need to be able to describe, right? So that's that descriptive writing, but it's also about experience. You have to have some sort of experience that you're writing and talking about how you were able to analyze a problem that was going on in it and how you were personally interested in addressing that problem. Another question, every person has a creative side. It can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, again, that analysis, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So like for all those artistic people out there, that's great. You've got art. You've often that art is showing something about themselves, right? It is something that is deeply personal that they are putting into some sort of visual or auditorial form. You have to be able to write about what that is. Like if you had, oh, you drew this, what does it mean about you? What is it saying about you? You would have to be able to actually do that analytical process about yourself and put it in there. What would you say your greatest talent or skill is? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So literally it's asking you to reflect on what are your strengths and weaknesses, and then being able to write about it succinctly. Describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or work to overcome a barrier you have faced. So again, description, being able to talk about something that you have actually experienced, some of these hardships, and what did you do as a result? How did you respond? How did you reflect? How did that change you? And if you weren't certain like that it needed to be actually talking about what you did and how that shifted you and how you grew as it, this next question, describe the most significant challenge you faced and the steps to overcome this challenge. So it's not just about education, but anything. How has that challenge affected your academic achievement? Like you got to do that reflective process. How does it connect back? Think about an academic subject that inspires you. Describe how you have furthered this interest inside and or outside of the classroom. So again, like kids need to be able to be like curious. That was that thing that they were talking about at the beginning. Like we want kids who are curious. How do you demonstrate curiosity? Oh, well, you write about it in this essay where you talk about all the things you've done to develop this interest that shows that you have become this expert in your field. Like that is literally the essay for writing that expert niche, where you're like, this is something I am passionate. I am super passionate about concussions because my mom had a concussion. I've done all this research on concussions. Now I have an essay. And then what have you done to make your school or community a better place? Like this one, they're literally just like saying, like, please talk about how you can be a leader in issues. So like you need to, this is where students need to have issues that they care about and talk about experiences that they've done to address them and what they are actually doing. And it has to be like something, the key thing, it's got to be something that is like personal to them. They have to have that reflective elements in there. They have to be able to describe and analyze those elements in order to make an effective essay. So finally, those were from the UC system, right? The leader, the one that is like, we're not focusing on it. But these also correlate to the Common App, which is what you can do from most universities in the United States. They will accept this Common App. And even in here, you see those exact same things. Actually, when I counsel college kids, if they are all interested in the UC system, we always start with those UC system questions because they're shorter. There's 4 of them. They're only 350 words. They write 4. They're like, oh, this one's my best one. And then we adapt that into a full one that can be brought into one of these six. And we'll see whichever ones they're strongest, but you see they very much align because these are the things that colleges are looking for. This is what they want to see from their kids. They don't want to see just like before it was like SAT scores. Yeah, that's good. Grades are good. And we need something else. Like Stanford rejected, what was it, like 40% of the people who got 1600s, they just rejected. Or maybe was it six? Okay, this was when I was in college. I don't know the most recent stats. Now they're just like, we don't care about it. So it's even more about this personal statements. It's the same things though. It's describing, recounting, challenge setbacks. Literally, it's saying reflect on something that you have done made you thankful. Like if kids can't reflect about their experiences, they can't write these essays. An accomplishment. Reflect on a time when you were questioned or challenged a belief. Very important for these days. Something that they are definitely colleges want them to be able to see. Your background and identity. What does it mean to you? Describe a topic you find so engaging you lose track of time. Again, it's the curiosity stuff. So like the colleges are laying out, this is what we are looking for. This is how you can demonstrate it. So if I am a parent or care about a kid that is looking into going to college, this is what I'm trying to nurture in my kid is this reflective writing. So some key takeaways with that to like make sure this really drives home. Like getting into these top colleges requires that your students are going to be able to reflect on experiences. That means you have to be able to have quality experiences. Quality experience is no longer like, yeah, I study all the time, right? Like that, I'm home, I'm practicing, I'm getting great grades. I like have an immense vocabulary. I can crush any SAT vocabulary. I can crush any math SAT question. Like that doesn't matter. It also means that like you shouldn't be just like playing video games all the time. Is not necessarily quality experiences. Being on social media isn't necessarily a quality experience. You have to have like things where you are interacting with the world. Those are the quality experiences that can actually force you to grow. That doesn't mean that those video games can't be something, but it's much harder to do. And we'll talk about that. But on top of having those experiences, they also require you to be able to reflect on them. Like you can have great experiences, but unless you have that reflective skill where you can analyze what happened in those experiences, how they showed up in your life, what you learned and how you grew from them, and to be able to write about that, it doesn't matter. Like you got to have both the experiences and that writing ability. And that writing ability, as I said earlier, takes years of practice to develop.
Yeah, so then can we see an example of what this will look like in a personal statement?
Yeah, I think that is actually some of the most helpful things to do. So if we look at this one here, this is from the UC system. Because again, the UC system, it's the best way to start. It's a little bit more concise. But this is answering one of those UC questions. So for those of you who can't see it, I will actually read it and then being able to analyze what they are doing in it. So when I was 10, and this is not me, so this is not my essay. When I was 10, my dad told me that in and on my body, bacteria outnumbered human cells. For a 10-year-old, this was a horrifying idea. I squeezed my forearms tightly in attempts to squish the foreigners to death. I showered the way too hot for 10-year-old's water. I poured lemon juice all over my body. So immediately we're seeing is this like rich description. We're also seeing like in the language that we have here, right? Like that is that vivid imagery. That is that descriptive language that students are going to need to develop and being able to put into it that shows it. And we already have like these emotions attached to it. They're having an experience, they have this emotions. It's also 10 years old. That's something to keep in mind. We'll come back to that. Today, however, I'm no longer terrified of hosting minuscule pals. Instead, I embrace them as a way to be surrounded daily by microbiology. Ever since my 6th grade teacher showed my class a video on Typhoid Mary and taught us about pathogens, I've been fascinated by and with cells. I've decided then and there that I wanted to be a doctor and study microbiology. So we're still getting those emotions, right? That's when this is what like the, sorry, I should have said this in the beginning. That gold there is really highlighting these emotions for you. And that's a key part of this writing. Like reflection is ultimately understanding your thoughts and emotions and how they shape your life. So we're seeing that in here. We're also seeing these immediate understandings of how those experiences in sixth grade reflect to their larger goals, right? This kid at sixth grade is saying, I want to be a doctor. And they're not just saying like, yo, I want to be a doctor because doctors are cool, right? Like doctors make a lot of money, they help people. No, that's basic. They're saying, I want to study microbiology. Oh, and sixth grade, that's interesting. That's specific. Great. What was the experience that did it? Great. You talked about this. This feels personal. This feels real. Great. But still, then, like, this is what college is, and we'll see. Like, so what do you do with it? Every kid, like, yeah, what do you do with it? Over the summer, I shadowed Dr. Wang Mei Ling, a general practitioner. I observed case after case of bacterial interactions on the human body. An inflamed crimson esophagus suffering from streptococcus, bulging flesh from a staph infection, food poisoning from E. coli-laden dishes. I was her researcher, looking up new drugs of potential illnesses that cause particular symptoms. So here again, we have that rich description. Like it's clear they were there. It's clear they've been doing things. They're painting that vivid descriptive language portrait. They're also having this real experience that is based in their goals. This is what colleges are looking for, real life experience that shows some sort of demonstrated interest. It's easy to say like this last minute, oh yeah, I need to get specific with my goals. I'm going to be a doctor in microbiology because I did a quick Wikipedia search. It's harder to then like, so that's why like anyone could theoretically do that if they know to do that. To have that demonstrated experience is the important thing. And that's what we're seeing here. There's this rich description. And if we go on to paragraph 4 here, intrigued by the sensitive balance between the good and bad bacteria on our bodies, I changed my lifestyle. Immediately getting at reflection after researching more about biological processes. So that emphasis on how I'm changing, looking at my life, looking at those experiences, being able to reflect on how I'm changing and what I'm doing differently, that is reflective writing. I viewed my cheek throws through a microscope in AP Bio. Great. He had an experience and then he took AP Bio because he wanted to do even more. And I realized that each cell needs to be given the right nutrients. Great. Takeaways. Learning about foods enhanced my organ functions and immune systems, and I now eat regularly for the daily intake of probiotics to facilitate my digestion. Great. They have this reflection. Honestly, I'm going to say this one's like, what they did with it is, you know, kind of basic because it's only individual. How I would be, it was like, so you only talked about yourself in this, like versus all the other people that don't get proper nutrition. That's if this was my kid. So I would like tweak this and push them to go farther. As a future pediatrician, though, so now, okay, great, they're doing that thing. Let's go future here. I hope to teach children how to live symbiotically with bacteria instead of fearing them. They're like, oh yeah, good. They are getting about how this impacts other people. It could have been better if they had actually started to do that, but they at least recognize that importance. I will stress the importance of achieving the right balance of good and bad microbes through healthy habits. How are they impacting the world? How are they shaping it? They want demonstrated proof of that. Rather than attempting to extinguish the microbes on me, today I dream of working in an environment loaded with bacteria, whether it's finding cures for diseases or curing kids from illnesses. Like a daily reminder, the minute microbes in and on me serve as a reminder of my passion for the complex but tiny foundation of life. Which is just this kind of more like fancier way of, but then it's got some fanciness, but it also ties it into real life goals, what they're trying to do. And that's ultimately what kids need to be thinking about while they are doing this.
Okay, so thank you for analyzing this excellent example. But I guess a following up question would be, personal statement sounds like something that's really college application oriented. So students are super busy nowadays. Can't they just start worrying about this when they're in the 12th grade? What's the best time to start learning reflective writing?
Yeah, great question. Um, right, like it's probably what you are thinking about right now. Like, yeah, that's 12th grade though. That's 11th grade tops. Like I'm in 7th grade. Shouldn't I be doing other stuff in 9th grade? Like, why do I need to be starting to be thinking about this now? And I cannot stress the importance about starting as early as possible. Like like I said earlier, it takes years of practice to be able to develop the effective writing styles because you simply just do not get that same practice in schools as you should. Yeah, the classes just aren't as oriented towards it. And I would also say, like looking at that example that we had, when when did this person start to think about this work? Um, and that essay, like it started when they were 10, they had it, but they probably, like, okay, so they were thinking about microbes there. That was an initial experience. They established their goal when they were in 6th grade. They had this goal of being a doctor with microbiology. That's when they started. um, and then based off of that, they did internships, and then as a result of that internships, they took AP Bio. um, I would stress that as when you are earlier, it gives you more chances to have those, like, oh, I have this reflection. Let me have an internship. Let me do something about it. Let me see if I actually like it. And if not, I could have a chance to tweak it. Like the earlier you are, the better it is to be able to develop that and be able to develop those skills and habits that go alongside it. To give you an example of like my own life, how this worked out for me, like I didn't start it in 6th grade, but I did start in 7th grade, having the same idea. And in 7th grade, Glenn wanted to be an aerospace engineer. In particular, I wanted to design the Venture Star. I wanted to work on the Venture Star project, which was this spaceship that was going to replace the space shuttle. The space shuttle was being phased out, and as a 7th grader, I knew this, and I knew, Lockheed Martin was developing this new space shuttle that was going to like revolutionize space travel, and allow all these sort of things that will happen that like help mankind, just like NASA did with satellites. Like this is going to be the new thing. As a result of that interest, like I really cared about my like science classes. Like those were my jam, and I did like all the sort of extra projects, that like all the extra credit assignments. Literally, I had 193% in my class because the guy was like, I don't know what to do with you. I'm just going to keep giving you extra credit because I kept doing more and more assignments. Um, that 8th grade, great. 9th grade is really mattered because I was like, I want to do aerospace engineering. Let me get involved in the like technology student association where I started to learn actually how to do this stuff, the robotics. And so I did robotics club throughout, and I became vice president and then president of it. And we would like go to state competitions and we would win state competitions. And as a result, when I applied to colleges, I applied as an aerospace engineer. And so those were how I based my majors, and that's how like I was accepted into aerospace engineering. By the time that I'd gotten those acceptances, like so that was I had sent those essays out in December. Come May, I was like, wait a minute, not May, yeah, May, when you have to like matriculate and decide what you want. I was like, actually, I don't like aerospace engineering. What I really care about is the effects of it and how it shapes people. And I was like, I really care about political science. And so literally I shifted my major before I even got there to political science. I never took an engineering class. They didn't care. Like Notre Dame didn't care. They were just like, oh, this kid clearly shows that he's passionate about things. Whatever he does, I'm sure he'll do well in. And that's what you need to be thinking about for yourselves. It's like, let me develop this story. Let me develop those interests. And then, once college gets in, great, you can also shift it. But thinking about how you would ultimately develop that reflective writing now. This is literally the same. Like I have an eighth grade niece, and this is what I'm talking to her about every day. Like, what are your experiences going to be in summer? How can we develop that reflective writing? How can we start getting you to think about your place in the world and what issues you care about? And that's what I'm telling her right now to do, is like, you just need to find out the things you care about. That was a long story, and I appreciate you sitting with me with it, about why starting early is as important as possible. Because ultimately, if you don't, this is what your essay could end up like. This is what we would call a bad essay. It starts off with like 5 score and 3 years ago, which is clearly an allusion to Abraham Lincoln's 4 score and 7 years ago, right? Our forefathers, like the Gettysburg Address. Okay, cool. Theodore Roosevelt, a daring, noble, virtuous American in whose prestigious shadow I live today, proclaimed the essence of courage. And then we give this really long quote from Teddy. Okay. Now, in the hour of my greatest leap forward into college, these words of Roosevelt reverberate in me. Okay. Well, Roosevelt, those are cool words from Roosevelt. Tell me more about you. I conquered my fear and emptied my guts onto a regional cross-country race. Or when I ran through the shackles of self-consciousness and decided to run for a campaign at Boise State. Like, we're getting these bits and pieces of this kid doing interesting stuff, but we're not like seeing that same reflectiveness. We're seeing what I would call fluff. Lots of fancy English terms in here. I found the courage in his words and simply tried. Now, because of Roosevelt, I know that if I just dare to step forward into the arena, whether that be the race courses of cross country, again, race courses of cross country, how does this apply? Is he running cross country at this school? The essays of AP English, clearly not. Or the forms of political debate, oh, maybe. And mar my face with blood, sweat, and tears, interesting allusion. Even if I end up failing, at least I will know that the flowers of my success do not bloom randomly. Like this, frankly, how this is written, and I know this because I personally know the author, they wrote it like it was an AP English class. They were like, oh, this is how you write in AP English. This is literally how this is how novels are written, like fancy. Like there's some like Steinbeck, there's some Abe Lincoln in here. There's like, but that's not how you write for college. AP Language and AP Lit are not how you write for college. It's a very different thing. Like if you're counting on your AP classes to be able to prep you for it, unless you have a very purposeful AP language teacher who is like, you know what, I need to add in this college stuff, it's just a totally different style. And that doesn't mean AP language and AP lit isn't very important. Like they are so important to be able to demonstrate English proficiency, but it's just different types of English proficiency. And you need to be able to do both for that. So towards that, how do you make sure that your essays don't end up like this person's and more like the first person's? What should you do to develop these skills? And for middle school, what I would say is that you need to, like, first, the most important thing is that you find these nonfiction texts, including memoirs, that expose yourself to different areas of interest and industries and paths forward in life. Like for me as a kid, that was popular science. Like my parents, they were like kind enough to subscribe to popular science, and I learned that's where I learned about the Venture Star. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Let me learn more about the Venture Star. Like kids need exposure to stuff. They need to be reading about those nonfictions. That can be books, that can be magazines. Social media and YouTube can help in that. Social media less so, YouTube a little bit, but a little bit more, but you need that depth of understanding about what's going on. The nonfiction texts, why I'm saying like YouTube can be useful, it can give you the content, but it doesn't give you the exposure to the language. So if you're reading memoirs and seeing how other people have done stuff, that's going to also give you more exposure to what is possible. That's going to give you that exposure to that language, which is what you're going to need to write with. So seeing that language is important, because if you can't see it, you can't do it. So knowing that. Then in order to practice that actual writing, so like this is literally what I'm like, this is what I did, and this is what I'm telling my niece to do now. I didn't have to start a journal. I didn't write a journal when I was a kid, but that was 20 something, no, I don't know, 15 years ago. College has gotten only more competitive. So now I'm thinking, and it's only going to get more competitive in the future. So like, how do you up the game? How do you beat the competition? Well, you need to actually start a journal where you are recording this. Like I'm telling my niece, you need to do this, right? Like start a journal, record what's happening, record your experiences, write it down as we're going. You need to apply to summer camps and or programs that require essays. Like this starts in middle school where you have these camps, these programs, and you like, the more you practice, like literally I'll have kids, and these are students that I'll work with. Yeah, you're in ninth grade. Apply to Cosmos. Chances you getting in, slim. But seeing those essays and having to write in that way is that first gap of like, oh, this is what I got to do. I see now. Now I know what to fill in. And doing that as a ninth grader is great because you have all the time to do that. Doing that as an eighth grader, even better. So that would be more Cosmos. You can't apply it as a middle schooler. But that key thing that you're really trying to do in all of this, and this is where the journal is important, is so that you actually record it, is that you are able to develop that self-knowledge about your passions, interests, and goals. Kids should be able to say in eighth grade and seventh grade, I want to do this for these reasons. If they can't, like that's a problem. Like it can shift, but it needs to be, they need to be able to say that. So that's middle school. They're just starting to do that. In high school is where it really gets important. And in high school, they really are going to need to practice this writing, this memoir, this descriptive, this narrative writing assignments beyond school, ideally. Like they will get those assignments, but ultimately they're going to need to have some sort of structured format by which they can continually practice that, like submissions to something or some sort of formal structure. We'll talk more about that. But like doing what you see in school is not enough. You've got to be able to practice at least journaling outside of school. You should be joining organizations that match your interests and enable those leadership experiences. As a freshman, you should be joining the orgs that you eventually want to become vice president and president in. That's what your interest should be. You should be continuing the journal. I cannot emphasize this journal enough. Like that's the practicing the writing. And then as you were going and doing this journalism, you're hopefully reflecting on things. Oh, I don't actually want to do this. Let me try something else. Even that story of like, I did all these things and now I'm in this, like that is a great essay. That shows passion, that shows curiosity, that shows a story. That is that narrative writing that you're going to want to do. So like that journaling, that organizations, that practice are the things that you really want to do if you're in high school.
Yeah, so I feel like journaling sounds, to become the keyword here, but I believe that a lot of people have the experience of having a diary and then a weekly journal and then a monthly journal and then nothing at all, right? So like what if students want to learn like reflective writing more like systematically?
Yeah, so the systematic is I think the key word that you would want to do on that. And so with the systematic, right, like being able to do it is one thing, but you need to be able to get like feedback and have someone to like reflect and talk about your ideas. Like this can happen in a number of different ways. Like ideally, your teacher could be able to do this, but I don't know if your English teacher can do this. I, as a parent, would be wanting to do this as well, right? Like I would want my parent to be like having this constant thing. But we recognize that teachers are overworked and underpaid, and parents are overworked, probably still underpaid, but just have no time for what's going on. And so what we are offering is a way to get this sort of structure through a class. This is the reflective writing class. This is a new class. It's a class that I'm very excited to be teaching. Because all we get to do is just like explore your interest, explore your passions, expose yourself to different, like these are what other students are doing. This is how they're writing. This is what good memoir writing. How does that apply to your life? Let's discuss it. Let's frame it. Let's reflect. Let's write. and then let's feedback it, because that's the ultimate thing that you need to be able to do. Oh, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this passion. Okay, what can we do with it? How can we further develop that and give them those ideas? Because kids have the passions, they have the ideas. Sometimes they just need that little direction. So that's ultimately what this class is about, that brainstorming, that editing, that developing. Because again, it's the experiences, which is important and you're going to need to do, but it's also being able to practice reflecting on them, like that skill of reflecting, and then demonstrating that skill through the writing about it. So those are those three different parts that are really going to be key for this class. And in that, we give you two. You come with the experiences, which most kids have. We give you the analysis, where we practice that analysis and we practice that writing.
Yeah, I'm also personally very excited for this entirely new class, and I have several student samples that was they were graded by you. Then could you just tell us more about how you usually grade or comment on students' essays, and what are the aspects that you look for?
Right. And this is where you're going to be in a class with different kids, which is important because you get to see those different experiences. But you're like, wait a minute, I'm a super hard advanced writer, and this kid might not be super advanced, or that kid's super advanced and I'm not. The feedback through the differentiation happens. If it's just bro, these ideas aren't good, we need to think deeper about it before we get in the fine tooth, it becomes a lot more of what you see here, comments on the side, directions about how to think this large grain. But if you got that large grain, and this is also why we do multiple drafts of things, maybe you'll develop that large grain in one version. Maybe it takes multiple versions. Or you start off at the next one and you just need that fine grain, which is what that next slide I think is. Yeah, then it becomes great, you have good ideas, you have things, we just need to work on the mechanics here. And sometimes my experience is that with teachers, we're this is a little bit my experience as a teacher, we don't have enough time. We got 100 kids and we have to give feedback on all of them. We're just telling oh, your grammar is wrong, this is wrong. We're not taking the time to actually show you what is how it should be and how your language can be that. Because I think once you see it, you're oh, this is what I need to do, then you can replicate it. And that's what we do. We show, and then we give you the space, fix it, now do it independently on your own. But often that's just we don't pay our teachers enough. And we put too many burdens on them. So that is what we try and do to supplement that hard work of those teachers.
Yeah, definitely. So personalized corrective feedback is one of the most important things for language acquisition in general. And so by the end of our webinar, I would also like to introduce a lot of our reading and writing summer programs. So for summer 2021, we will have creative writing, nonfiction reading and writing, playwriting, and also research writing, as well as analytical writing taught by Dr. Glen. So feel free to scan the QR code here to know more about the course. And then all the Harmony Plus team are excited to meet you and your kids. And then besides that, we also have business academy summer programs. So we have entrepreneurship challenge, we have presentation skills, UX design, and we have a very special business training program called Knowledge at Wharton High School Global Investment Competition Training Program. And then we also have 4 professor or doctor-led research programs. So also feel free to scan the QR code, and we would love to provide more detailed information in the coming weeks. Then last but not least, we also offer leadership training as well as college application preparations. So if you are interested in leadership, interested in how to write college essays, interested in how to prepare for college application materials in general, also again, feel free to contact us. And so before we call it a day, I actually got several questions from our audience. So given that our time is quite limited, let me go to the first question. So this question writes, Is it better to have as many as possible people looking at your essays? What if people give you contradictory feedback?
Yeah, that's fair. Good question. No, I think quality over quantity. I've seen a lot of people give feedback, and a lot of people just don't know how to give feedback. Because like you have to keep in mind what the colleges are looking for, and some people will just like not know what that looked like, or they'll just like. Also, I think sorry, it's like often when I work with kids, it takes like 10 drafts to get to the good thing. Like we just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Um, and someone will come in midway and be like, "Oh, I think you're going in this direction," and I'm like, "No, no, that's not where they should be going." So it is still good to get like once I get to a kid to like at like, "Oh, this is good," I will still red team it. I'll be like, "Someone else take a look, make sure that this is not wrong." But you want to get it at that finalized version, and then you take it with a grain of salt, depending on who that person is and what their experience is with college admissions. Because it's an opaque game. It's weird. People don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like our time allows two more questions. So the next one would be for students who got an SAT score of 1230, should they spend more time on preparing SAT in the summer? Like when it comes to standardized tests and qualitative materials like personal statements, which one should students focus on first?
Yeah, no, I think what we are saying is like, do not worry about the SAT
Okay.
as much. Like, focus on developing the student's personality, their interests, and their passions, and having things that matter to them. Which like kids should be happy about this because it's like you get to do things that like are more exciting, and it's better for like social emotional learning. It's better for like citizenship. It's better for like quality of learning. Like, there's a reason this shift is happening, because you just don't have to submit it. Yeah, I would focus less on that based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I also see a parent asking like whether you help students polish their work and then send their work to any writing contests in the reading and writing classes.
So the reading and write depends on the course, right? Like the reading writing course, that one is like an instructor. Like, these are the different types that you need to be able to know. The research writing one aligns to a New York Times contest that they'll submit. We just literally had a bunch of kids submit to that one. The analytical essays, the analytical writing is what you would have to write for college, not like getting into college, but success in college. So it's a research project, which they could submit, but it depends on the level that they're going for. So it really varies on the essay. These ones are going to, this reflective writing is more for the personal. They will alternately have drafts of personal statements, but that they could use. But like I said, it takes 10 drafts. We're trying to get the ball rolling with them and getting them thinking about it and develop those habits. And to answer this other question, is it like from what I understand, we have a middle school and we have a high school class, because there's just one, you still need to be developing, like you need to be exposing, you need to be thinking about how to write descriptively. The other one's like, oh, we got to go crunch time. What are the organizations? So it's just like same level, same type of skill, but different levels.
So like I would really, as a host, I would really encourage everyone to just like scan the code to contact us if you have more questions regarding our courses, because this webinar is really coming to an end. And the last question we can take is that, is the reflective writing class for middle school or young high school kids? What if we are 11th grade student and want to work with Dr. Glen for essay feedback for college? Do you help looking at like essays and reflective writing courses?
So yeah, so that's what I was trying to get at, was that we do have the two different tiers. And then I think that if they are 11th grader, I guess I would have them sign up for that reflective class, because we will be doing those sort of essays in that class. But if they're looking for more personalized, I think I don't know what Harmony Plus's policies are on that. So
Okay, yeah, as a side note, like we do offer one-on-one tutoring sessions for essays. So yeah, so just please feel free to contact us. And like at the last minute of this webinar, I would like to show you the topic for our next week's webinar. It will be about the Wharton Global High School Investment Competition. So this is like a world known, like we can say it's the best business competition for high school students on a world level. So our instructor for the summer program will talk about how to succeed in the competition called KWHS, and then also what are the benefits of participating in such a competition. Also, he'll talk about like the skills that are strengthened through the competition and like how it's going to teach these skills during our very intensive and well-designed summer program. So thank you all for coming, and thanks to Dr. Glen again for such a insightful webinar. So we look forward to see you in our next webinar.